And I need to see where did everyone go? Okay, at this point, I cannot see where my Zoom things are, but that's okay. So welcome everyone. I am super excited that you all here make the time to be at this meeting. This is our inaugural event for Virginia Women in High Performance Computing. What I have here right now is just an outline of how the meeting is going to look like. We're going to talk about who we are and how we came about. Also, I'm going to mention what are the plans that we have and how we're going to be moving forward with the program. I really want to mention that the target audience here is everyone who is interested in the equal representation of women in HPC, and we're always looking forward, regardless of gender, you are invited to be here. If you want to become or be a male ally and advocate, you are welcome. You are in the right place here. The presentation today is going to be composed of three amazing speakers. And the topic that they will be highlighting is how does HPC help with your scientific research? And this is all from a faculty perspective. Our speakers today is Julian Quinn from the University of Virginia, Melinda Jan from the University of Richmond, and Grace Hsu from William and Mary's Virginia Institute of Marine Science.
Gladys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you expecting us to be seeing your slides at this point?
Yes.
We cannot see the slides yet.
Oh, thank you. Okay, this is good. I guess I'm not getting used to the whole Zoom yet, you know, after a year and a half. Let me see what happened here. Why it's not doing what I needed to do. I'm gonna have to switch here. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. Okay, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. And I think that I also need to switch here. My apologies about that. Once I thought that I had got it. Okay, that should work. Just change camera here, and I'm sharing the screen, and I'm just gonna put it in a view mode here. Let me know, please, if you don't see it. It should work this time.
Working perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And my apologies for that. So our meeting is going to be, each speaker is going to have about around 15 minutes, and we're going to have some questions at the end. But if you have questions, just please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will try to answer. If you want to know more about the program, you have specific questions, just put it out there, and then we're going to do a wrap up and just give you a highlight when our next meeting is going to be. So just to let you know a little bit about who I am, my name is Gladys Andino. I am with Research Computing at the University of Virginia. Before I joined this team, I was before at Purdue University, and in 2016, even before I knew that the Women in HPC organization existed, I started working with my coworker and office mate in creating a community that was about women in high performance computing. So we founded the Women in HPC at Purdue 2016. Later on, we find out that the Women in HPC organization existed, and we become part of the first Women in HPC chapter pilot program in 2018. At the time while I was at Purdue, we did a recruitment of 112 members, and we increased the national recognition of Purdue as an advocate for workforce diversity, and we participated in different conferences. When I knew I was moving to UVA, I think that in my first meeting, the first thing that I mentioned when I was going to be hired is if I was going to have the opportunity to do something similar here at UVA. And with that, the idea came and started growing, and I decided, why to just keep it at UVA? We are so many different small sister institutions that we are in the Virginia area, so why not to do it statewide? And so I started reaching out to different people, the different universities, and that's how we came about to, forming the Virginia Women in HPC program. So I like the logo of Virginia that says out there that Virginia is for lovers. So I want to put it in context of this community. That Virginia is for HPC and also for women in HPC and for male allies and advocates. So in conjunction with the Virginia Commonwealth University, George Mason University, Virginia Tech, William and Mary, University of Richmond, and Research Computing at the University of Virginia, we have founded Virginia's first woman in high performance computing program. And what we hope to do here is that we are committed to increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion by promoting and encouraging the participation and equal representation of women in HPC and other technological fields. And that's why we are here. So what we hope to offer as a program, what we vision is that to be able to have regular meetings. And when we say regular meeting, this means at this moment, it's gonna be quarterly, whether these meetings could be in person or virtual, probably a combination of two, depending where we're hosting and, you know, to what sense of normality we come around next year. The idea is to have invited technical speakers and role models that come and talk to our community. And what we want to do at this point is to actually highlight what we have in our community in Virginia. We also will be going about professional development talks, and you know, just those that are interested in some professional development. We're also looking to be able to host speakers that will be able to help us with that. We want to provide, and this is one of the big things for me, just provide a local community and a working opportunities where we can share events about what is going on in the community and how we are highlighting the work the woman in whether in HPC or in other technical fields are doing. We want to be able to host coffee conversations and also focus groups where we can just talk about different things related to HPC or professional development. One of the big things on my mind is the mentoring program. Is something that we want to do, and we want to create mentorship opportunities, especially for students, so that they can be exposed to female roles and models in different technical fields, but especially in the HPC field. We want to be able to create opportunities for students to have access and to have opportunities to pursue a career in HPC. We want to be able to also reach funding for female students to attend conference and also to create internship opportunities, since we are multiple HPC groups represented here. So we also, this group is, like I mentioned at the beginning, is not just target just for women. We welcome anyone that is willing to come and support and to be our allies and advocates. So I just put this slide here, especially for the males and this meeting, so that you can be in a male ally. And I'm gonna be able to provide the link to this document here, just to give you an idea what being a male ally and advocates actually means or what it's all about. The other thing that I want to mention is that there is a woman in HPC organization, and as today, there are 70 charters all across the globe and 4 affiliates. And when we take a look at how it looks in the United States, you know, we have a couple chapters, 9 in total so far. But Virginia and all what it is, you know, the east part of the country, there is no yet, you know, nothing on the map. And so I try to highlight here in a big circle Virginia, because I hope to see us there, you know, in a year or so or sooner than that, and to be in the map of the Women in HPC organization. I highly encourage everyone that is here that if you are interested, you can just click on the link there and go and review the Women in HPC organization. You can become a member or affiliate at any point, and you can actually affiliate yourself to a specific chapters that are represented in the country. And so on with that, I just want to say that anyone that is interested in the Women in HPC events here at Virginia, you are welcome to join us. I have tried to add everyone that is right now in our committee. If you see, we have 6 institutions represented. We're still looking for members from ODU and also JNU. So if you have friends that might be interested from this institution, please, you can put it in contact with any one of us. And with that, I want to give the room and the space for our speakers today. And our first speaker is going to be Julianne Quinn from the University of Virginia. I'll stop my slide, and Julie, the screen is yours.
Awesome, thank you, Gladys. Let me share my screen. All right, everyone seeing my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Gladys, and also Karsten for inviting me. I'm really excited to share my work on water resource systems analysis, and in particular, how we're able to address problems we wouldn't otherwise be able to address thanks to high performance computing. So to dive right in, the types of questions that my group focuses on is broadly, how can we best manage water resources for conflicting objectives under uncertainty? And I think this picture on the right really is a great picture of what we do. Typically, when we're managing water resources, it's at a scale that we call a watershed, which is the area of land that drains to a particular point. And within that watershed, there are all sorts of different stakeholders who want to use water for different purposes. We have power plant cooling, water supply for municipalities, irrigation for agriculture, flood protection, environmental flows for fish, hydropower production, etc. And managing water for these different uses conflicts with one another, which is challenging. And not only that, but there's a lot of uncertainty in both supply of water resources due to climate variability and climate change, as well as demand for those water resources due to population growth, migration, technology, etc. So unfortunately, we can't in practice actually implement alternatives and see what the effects are. So instead of doing that experimentally, we use computing resources. And this can be very computationally expensive for a number of reasons. One is the models themselves that we use to look at these management options. If we want to capture the spatial heterogeneity and say soil conditions, climate conditions, users, etc., we often want to use a distributed hydrologic model that can be very computationally expensive to run. And if we want to capture uncertainty, we'll want to run management scenarios in these hydrologic models under a lot of different potential climate scenarios, for example, shown here. And there's uncertainty in, say, how humans will in the future emit global carbon and what the impacts not only of those different emission scenarios are on the climate. So what might the temperature and precipitation impacts be of these possible future greenhouse gas emission pathways that we might take. So we have to run these hydrologic models under a number of different scenarios. And then finally, if we're interested in management for conflicting objectives, what my group does is multi-objective optimization to look at how we can better manage these systems. And doing multi-objective optimization is challenging because these problems are stochastic given the uncertainty. There are nonlinear systems with unknown gradients. And so we use multi-objective evolutionary algorithms to try to solve these problems. And these start with a number of solutions. And we're trying to iterate and change these management options to converge to optimal solutions across our objectives, while also diversifying across them. And the benefits of this are we get a number of different management scenarios like those shown in red here that trade off these objectives in different ways, and you can present them to stakeholders and allow them to deliberate and arrive at compromise solutions for managing the system under uncertainty. So I was just going to today go into, I see a few things in the chat. Okay, no questions. A few examples of how our group has used high performance computing, what types of problems we're trying to solve. And typically we're interested from a research perspective and trying to develop new methods. What I'm going to focus on today are more the results that come out of this, the applied results, and how high performance computing allows us to find them. And we'll see if I get through all these examples. I might have been a little overzealous for 15 minutes. But the first example here is on optimizing the siting, sizing, and control or operations of both green and gray infrastructure to balance the cost of implementing that infrastructure against their benefits of reducing floods, nutrient loads to water bodies, and trying to mitigate the impacts on exacerbating low flows for environmental flows. And then a second example, we actually have two examples here on multi-reservoir systems where we're trying to manage the operations of multiple reservoirs to balance socio-ecological conflicts in one system, and in another enable flexible integration with the power system as the grid decarbonizes. And then a third example where we're assessing coastal flood risk from a combination of drivers, sea level rise, storm surge, and rainfall, all of which are expected to intensify under climate change. And then after assessing those risks, seeing how we can mitigate them by designing natural and nature-based features on the shoreline, as well as green and gray infrastructure inland to try to reduce the risks. So I'll start with this first example here. And this work was done primarily by my postdoc, Jared Smith, in collaboration with my student Hossein, who is expanding on this work, and in collaboration with Professor Larry Band at UVA. where we're looking at green infrastructure development in the greater Baltimore area shown here. And this region is important because it drains to the Chesapeake Bay, where there's excessive nutrient loads that can result in hypoxic conditions that result in major fish kills in the region. And these nutrient loads can be exacerbated by runoff from agricultural fields, as well as greater runoff from urbanization. And so what we would like to do is in these areas where we've been urbanizing, develop green infrastructure, for example, reforesting, to try to both reduce the nutrient loads as well as reduce flooding in the region. Oh, and Grace said, Jared was an invited speaker, awesome. So yeah, Jared's great, and he was the one who did all this work. So we were looking at green infrastructure development in this area, but there's uncertainty not only in the climate, but also in how these hydrological models represent the system itself. So typically, these hydrologic models have all sorts of parameters, and we can't physically go out and measure them everywhere. And so we have to estimate them through calibration. And that one of the challenges is that there are a wide number of parameter sets that might do equally well in simulating flows and nutrient loads at the outlet of our watershed, but have very different distributions of the loads spatially throughout the watershed, and we don't have data to know which of these, if either, is correct. And we can also see that in looking at the posterior distribution of, say, a particular parameter, where you can see there isn't a sharp peak, but a wide range of parameter values that are nearly equally likely. And so this has implications for where we would put green infrastructure if it looks like this versus if it looks like that. And what we would like to do is therefore find strategies that are robust to this uncertainty. And so we need some kind of robust optimization that's very computationally expensive. So in this system, we did a robust optimization, and we also did an optimization to the most likely parameter set to see what the benefits of robust optimization are. And you can see from a particular optimization, we get a trade-off where if we want to reduce floods, it comes at the expense of exacerbating low flows. And there's a cost where we have to plant more trees to enable those reductions. So we looked at an example here. What if we wanted to reduce floods by at least 20% without exacerbating low flows by more than 20%? And our robust optimization would choose this solution in blue here. We could also see what solution we would get out of the most likely optimization, and then reevaluate those policies on a synthetic true parameter set. So we calibrated to a set that we had made up as the true set to see what the consequences of being wrong in our calibration were. And you can see that from the robust optimization in blue, that solution degrades when you evaluate it on the true parameter set and actually no longer meets those criteria. But the degradation is even worse when we optimize the most likely parameter set, and it doesn't plant enough trees to be able to meet those requirements. So there are benefits here of doing this robust optimization and accounting for that uncertainty. And this was, again, vital to use high performance computing. The single hydrological model run took 10 minutes, and we did a sensitivity analysis first to see which parameters we should calibrate that impact our objectives, and there were 19. So in order to just calibrate the model, we ran 40 MCMC chains in parallel for 1,200 steps each, which took 8,000 core hours. And if we had to do that serially, it would take us almost a year. But the real benefits here come from the robust optimization, where all the designs that we evaluate have to be over these different parameter sets. And our optimization with both the robust optimization and the most likely took 65,000 core hours each, or 7 years. So the robust optimization has its benefits, but it wouldn't be possible without high performance computing. That's the first case study. The second case study here, I actually have two on reservoir operations. The first was done by my master's student, Sarah Jordan, who just graduated, where we were looking at operating reservoirs here in the Omo River Basin of Ethiopia, where recently they constructed a large dam, VA-3, to enable hydropower production that would be vital to enabling electrification in this region that currently does not have much electric power. And not only that, but these reservoirs can provide irrigation for farming downstream. But this reservoir was filled very rapidly, and there were concerns about its environmental impacts on people downstream as well as the ecology. So we wanted to look at how we can operate these reservoirs to meet the irrigation requirements of the sugar plantation downstream, while also ensuring we're having a natural flood pulse to maintain recession agriculture for the indigenous population that relies on the annual flood pulse, and that also relies on environmental flows to Lake Turkana downstream, which provides important fish for food security in the region. And so we optimize reservoir operations to balance all 5 of these objectives of hydropower production, sugarcane and cotton yields, as well as recession agriculture and environmental flows. And this optimization was performed using a hydrologic model called SWOT that enables us to look at the impacts of irrigation and reservoir operations, as well as the climate on the hydrologic system and plant growth and development. And from our optimization, we get a number of different solutions here shown by these colored lines, where they each weight these objectives differently. And each axis here is a different one of our objectives, oriented such that down is favorable. So an ideal solution would be a straight line across the bottom, but of course we can achieve that. So these lines cross, indicating trade-offs between objectives. And in particular, you see a strong trade-off here where the solutions that are the best on sugar and cotton come at the expense of environmental flows. But we are able to find a number of solutions here that do better than uncontrolled conditions across all objectives shown in black. So there can be actually some win-wins out of this reservoir development. And this is just historically, but if we also evaluate these operations on future climate predictions and look at the performance on these different objectives at mid-century and late century across all those predictions, these solutions shown in green here, again, are doing better than uncontrolled conditions across all of our objectives. And we can see that visually if we pick out in particular a compromise policy that we found from our optimization and look at the percent of years in these future projections where we observe different flows on different calendar days. And on the left, we're showing if we didn't have any reservoirs, what those percent of years would be in the future compared to what they were in the past, where we have the median dashed in the middle and then the min and max with these solid lines. And so you can see that climate change will increase our extreme high flows as well as our extreme low flows that could have severe impacts on the region. But with our compromise policy, we're able to mitigate those impacts. And in particular, in the flood season, we can reliably achieve our flood recession for downstream Indigenous people and reduce the flood impacts that might hurt agriculture downstream. All right, I'm at 12 minutes. So very quickly, another student of mine, Smar Singh, is looking at reservoir operations in the Columbia River Basin, where we've integrated operations with a model of the California West Coast power system. And so we can see the impacts of different reservoir operations on the price in the region and what the impacts would be for renewable energy generation. And Samartha's been able to find, we don't find anything that does better than historical on all objectives. So they have good historical operations, but as the grid decarbonizes, their preferences might change. And we can find a compromise solution that in particular does better on environmental spills for salmon and reduces floods compared to historical. But it does come at the expense of hydropower production. But this might not actually be of concern as the grid decarbonizes and starts relying on other alternative generation sources. And instead, we might want this additional flood protection, in particular, as Canada is renegotiating operations and might not be willing to provide flood protection that they're currently providing. So both of these models were computationally expensive and actually required a lot of files. So again, we used 7 years of computation for both of these optimizations. But the last case study I wanted to describe was on assessing coastal flood risk from sea level rise, where my current student, Daniel Lassiter, and I are collaborating with Professor John Goodall and our department at UVA, Engineering Systems and Environment, building off of John's work, evaluating risks of flooding under climate change in the region, in Norfolk in particular. I don't know if I said that. So we have joint risks from sea level rise, storm surge, and pluvio flooding, but we want to see if developing natural nature-based features on the shoreline and green and gray infrastructure inland can reduce these impacts. So this can be computationally challenging because characterizing extremes like the 100-year flood and how it might change into the future requires simulating large ensembles of flood events. And one way of doing this is by transposing historical events that may have occurred in one location historically, but could have occurred somewhere else, and the impacts would be different. And so by running all these simulations, we can get an idea of what the flood risk looks like in the tails. But this is very memory intensive to transpose these radar rainfall events, and then running them through an urban flood model, such as 2Flow that was used by John Goodall's group on the previous slide. For one event that would be a 72-hour event takes 4.5 to 6 hours on 2 GPUs. And so you can see how this will quickly add up. So I think that those are the case studies, the types of problems our group is addressing. The tipping takeaway is that designing and managing water resources infrastructure for conflicting objectives under uncertainty is very computationally expensive. But HPC is a really valuable tool that allows us to address these large-scale societal problems. And I just would be remiss to say that this has all been through UVA's Rivanna Computing Cluster, and the support staff there has been incredible in helping us to solve these problems, and very patient with us as we have sometimes used up a lot of resources and slowed things down in the file system, and they've helped us run things a little more efficiently. So thank you very much to Carson and others at UVA for making this possible. And I don't know if we're holding questions till the end, but I'm happy to take some now.
Yes, we will hold questions to the end, Julian.
All right, I'll let the next speaker go then.
I think the next is Melinda. Thank you, Julie.
Share screen. Right. And do you guys see a full PowerPoint?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to, there we are. Okay, so I will get started because there's not that much time. So I'm here to talk a little bit more generally about my work and also what's going on at the University of Richmond. And I was asked when I first joined this to sort of summarize my outline in terms of how did I get here, what's my research and what role does HPC play, and then how do I support the greater community in using resources tied to HPC. So my talk will sort of walk through that. And so just to start off, I'm a third-year assistant professor in the Department of Biology here at Richmond. And so I started about 3 years ago, you know, right that year the pandemic started. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how I ended up here and then how my direction really came out of biology and sociology and anthropology. And so my questions are really about the evolutionary genetics of humans. But then what I discovered when I was in undergrad was that computational work on human genomic data was really growing, a very, very fast growing field. And that what I wanted to learn was how to do data science to be able to approach this using HPC methods. And so what I did was I ended up at Berkeley, and I was in a biology department with a designated emphasis in computational genetics, where I was learning both bioinformatic and population genetic tools to study evolutionary genetic history. And then from there, I ended up it was more of a theory lab, and I ended up going and doing applied work in Beijing for 3.5 years as a postdoc in the molecular paleontology lab, which was doing ancient DNA research, and humans and other organisms, anything that's ancient is what we were interested in and trying to discern their evolutionary histories. It was great. It was combining both of my interests and the tools that I was learning to be able to do this type of work. And then I ended up deciding that I love this research environment, but I also want to give back and teach and bring this into the student community. And so I applied and got a job at University of Richmond and started in fall 2019. So that's sort of the circuit of how I ended up here. So the way I like to talk about myself is that I have many hats in the field of genetics. So I mentioned that I do population genetics, which is studying the variation in humans, across any organism in different populations. Tied to that is computational genetics, where we have genomics and different types of processes that we need, tools that we need to use to be able to obtain the genomic sequences that we're interested in them. And then also figure out how do we analyze large amounts of these type of data. And then finally, my particular root interest is in human evolutionary genetics, where I want to use population genetics and computational genetics to understand our past history from a biological perspective. And so for all of this, I like to think of myself as really using these computational and statistical tools to apply to this biological question that I'm looking at. All right, so getting a little bit more into this world of the type of research that I'm doing. So first of all, ancient DNA plays a really big role. So I just wanted to throw that out there over here, where here there are examples of the types of ancient bones of different humans that you might get. These are from about 8,000 to 7,000 years ago. Often we like to retrieve the sample material from this area of the bone, and then there's a whole bunch of wet lab procedures that occur to get that original bone powder and turn it into DNA sequences that we amplify and have enough of to be able to study. And then comes the part where we try to capture the pieces that we want to study and get them onto a computer where I do my job of doing the analysis. And so there's a huge workflow that even goes into what it is that I am working on. But this has been streamlined very well. There's a lot of robotic technology and like very well-designed protocols that have made this area very efficient. And so I'm allowed to sort of just hang around in this world of getting these final data and exploring what are the types of relationships that occur. Okay, so getting a little bit into like where does high performance computing play a role, I really wanted to emphasize both like size and scale of data, and then also the tools that we're using. And then so we have genomic data from these ancient humans. We have even more genomic data from present day humans, which are much easier to sequence. And then we of course have other types of data that are associated with these different groups, including geographical, archaeological, chronological, and maybe even cultural data, if we can combine it with archaeological data that's present. So along with storing all of these and being able to access them, we need the bioinformatic tools to process all of these raw data and get them from the lab into the computer. And then we need the statistical tools to understand the variation that we're trying to explore and how that variation can be used to infer aspects of our history. And then finally tied to that is often to be able to apply these statistical tools and to know that they're reliable. We are often using simulation-based tools that sort of map out our understanding of how genetic variation changes over time, so we can test the methodology and the models that we're creating. So this is really, in my field, sort of the 6 major things to be thinking about in terms of HPC. So getting a little bit into here, I guess, the genomic data from ancient humans and the types of things that we want to think about. Here, the very first focus is on ancient DNA, where the problem with ancient DNA is that it's short fragments. There's a lot of contamination, both from modern humans and from environmental organisms like microbial DNA. And then also over time, DNA gets damaged. And so you get natural errors that occur after the individual has died. And so in comparison, fresh DNA, if you just do a cheek swab, you can get a lot of DNA. So the comparison is like 1 microgram of DNA per gram of tissue. Here you get less than 0.0001 micrograms of DNA per gram of tissue. And so with all of these problems, it's like, why are we interested in this? And the 2 major reasons I like to summarize is that it gives us access to genetic variation that's not present today. And really the last 10 years of this field has sort of illustrated that without looking at this type of variation, we're actually missing huge slices of what was happening in our history. And then second, we have that direct association with past geography and culture. So we can really examine, like, we have this ancient group of people that we can really try to connect to present day groups or connect to other ancient groups in the area that we previously only really had cultural means to connect. So a lot of the process has been trying to figure out how do we deal with this, and really this process, it really entered into the computational world of how do we use computation and comparison with other databases that we have of known microbial DNA of present day humans to be able to pull out what we believe are going to be ancient DNA, so that we can take the small amount of data we have, sequence what's most important and not lose anything from this process, and get every single bit of what we need. So that's high performance computing plays a huge role in us even be able to sequence any ancient DNA whatsoever. Okay, so the other side of this is that we have many individuals. And so focusing on ancient DNA, this is a figure that is from a review paper in 2017. And they were marking all the different red dots here are marking all the different places where an ancient individual or individuals have been sequenced. And in total, that was about 1,000 individuals in 2017. At this current date, it's about twice as many, about 2,000 individuals. And then if we're wanting to include the present day humans that have been sequenced, like, you know, we're into tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands at this point, depending on publicly available versus more private data. So there's growing amounts of individuals and populations to compare. And so with that requires the ability to store these type of data and to be able to create sort of parallel analyses and things like that, and pipelines to be able to add new data that's coming out to the current pool of what's available. And then so the last side to this is this idea that this genome itself is made of many, many different positions. And so here, the word SNP means single nucleotide polymorphisms. And so these are the places within the genome where you have variant data and the ones that inform about any type of evolutionary history that we might be interested in. And then so even from a single individual, because they are a composite of multiple individuals in the past, you can actually get a lot of genetic information just from that one person, because you have aspects of their data from many of their ancestors. But to do that, you need to analyze all of these different variant positions, or as many of them as you can. And then so in general, for ancient data, there's been a panel of about 1.2 million SNPs that are often targeted. So that way, with all the missing data, if we're targeting these, we're putting our resources to the same set for analysis. And so with that, we just have large amounts, just with even one genome of one individual, large amounts of data that you need to understand just for that person, much less combining with other groups. And then finally, that we're focusing on the 1.2 million SNPs, but then in fact, there's more and more people. And if you're focused on present day humans or some ancient individuals, for instance, the Neanderthal archaic human, we have whole genomes for them. And then so you might be exploring more than just the ones that we're targeting. And there our genome itself is at least 3.1 billion base pairs, right? And a very, very large amount of that is analyzed in these different processes. Okay, so lastly, my one like summary slide with some actual data. So thinking about all of these different aspects, my focus is primarily in East Asia, largely in part due to me doing a postdoc in Beijing, where our applied research was in that area. And this is just an example of a set of ancient individuals that we were sequencing in Northern and Southern East Asia. From a period of about 10,000 years ago to about 300 years ago. And just a sort of sample figure here, sort of highlighting the way that these ancient individuals, the ones that are in color, they're a mix of previously published and the ones from this data set, of how they fall within the present day distribution of East Asians. And using this and other statistical tools, we really could understand a lot about the past history of humans in East Asia within the last 10,000 years, and seeing sort of divisions in Northern and Southern populations that we don't see really as clearly in the present day due to heavy amounts of mixture across this entire region. And then I just wanted to highlight that this research here is focused on Asia, but it's really, there's been numerous amounts of work that's really highly dependent on HPC tools to be able to understand different aspects of ancestry back in time dating to at least 45,000 years ago, that would not have been possible without the tools that we have today. Okay, so transitioning from my research, I wanted to talk a little bit about how expect to support the greater community, both here at UR and sort of thinking about what's going on with the WHPC. And so they asked me two questions, and they're like, choose one, and I couldn't, so I have one slide on each. So first I wanted to introduce you guys to UR a little bit. And our data analytics and data science community is growing very, very quickly. And so we have staff and community that show a gender balance of about 50%, which is great, and I think quite rare across this world. Also, if you take a look at this community, it's also one with many faculty of color that are represented, especially amongst the female faculty. And with this growing community, there's really an interdisciplinary effort to build more support for data analytics and data science within our pedagogical system. And so one thing that's happening is that there's an effort to build a data science minor for undergraduates that wasn't really available before. And there's an increasing number of courses across many different disciplines that wants to bring data science into the classroom and also examine the role of data science in the community, like at large. And so one of the big things that happened in the last year is that we wanted to get a high performance computing cluster here within our community so that anyone who wants to use these resources has access to them. And so that way we can support HPC in research as well as in the classroom. And what I want to emphasize is that groups that are using this aren't just sort of math and CS world, it's also biology, geography, digital humanities, and in many others. And then to build that support staff so that they can not only help support the cluster itself, but also help develop teaching tools to help decrease the hurdle to accessing the cluster and using it in the classroom and in research. So this is many, many efforts and discussions that are happening here at UR. And then my last bit is just beyond UR, when I was asked to think a little bit about what do I want from this WHPC meeting. These were just some of the things that I came up with. I admit Carol also helped with this. And so some things are supporting women in HPC, both in teaching, but also in research, but also mentoring of students who are perhaps new to this type of area and have never seen it before. And that ties into this idea of enhanced visibility for women and people of color in HPC, and to highlight those role models here for students of diverse backgrounds. And of course, to sort of build that community, where in that community we can network and provide assistance with each other, especially since we're also close to each other. And also, I think ways to examine how HPC is utilized within the different fields and in universities, because that helps us understand the variability and the needs of HPC and inform best practices. So with that, I'm going to finish up, and I wanted to thank Carol and of course all the organizers for that opportunity to speak here. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Grace. And thank you for that presentation. I absolutely enjoyed it. I'm just biased towards bioinformatics though.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for staying throughout the lunch hour presentations. I think I'll limit myself to 10 minutes just so people don't feel obligated to stay over time. Unlike Julie or Melinda, I'm not going to present the science per se. I'm just going to give you a little story of my journey as a computational Bayesian. And in a couple spots of my presentation, I'm going to mention why I've come full circle. So first of all, what am I? Who am I and what am I? I'm a professor of environmental statistics at VIMS. VIMS is the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is a research institute that houses the William and Mary School of Marine Science. So the research institute doesn't just do education. We also do government advisory and industry engagement and other kinds of activities related to marine research. But in terms of the academic side of things, we are the host or the hub of the William and Mary graduate studies in marine science. So that's what the School of Marine Science does. I'm the statistician at VIMS, as in I'm the only person with a PhD in statistics at VIMS. So a lot of the work that I do is obviously developing statistical methods, but revolving around environmental science. So I have a lab that I named the Environmental Statistics and Transdisciplinary Data Science Lab. So both Julie and Melinda mentioned data, and also Julie mentioned MCMC and Bayesian. Those are all the things that I do. But I'm more than happy to give people more of a sense of what exactly are the roles of those elements in my work. In particular, what's meant by being a Bayesian. So rather than doing it here, I'm more than happy to engage folks offline to give them more of an idea of why being a Bayesian is computational in nature. But even just a very quick lowdown of my philosophy as a statistician, statistics as a discipline is the science of understanding the universe through data. And so nowadays, a lot of people would think of data science and statistics as not necessarily one thing. I came from the school of thought where statistics and data science are one thing under a big umbrella. So mostly as a statistician and data scientist, I develop Bayesian methodologies that are mostly very computationally intensive. So Bayesian methodologies are simply a way to conduct statistical inference under a certain paradigm that's called Bayesian paradigm. And like I say, I'm more than happy to explain more about that. But let's start from way, way early. In the early 1990s, when I was a undergraduate student, I was fortunate enough to be awarded a summer internship at the British Columbia Cancer Agency in Vancouver. That's where I'm from. And there I was working on this concept of a Gibbs sampler, which was an entirely new thing to me as an undergraduate statistics student. I never understood what's meant by a sampler, let alone, you know, the gazillion different types of samplers. But I started with the most fundamental sampler called the Gibbs sampler. And that was for doing Bayesian inference. And I coded it in C for my supervisor at the cancer agency. And back in the day, if you need computing power, you use the mainframe. And mainframes were mostly you know, a Unix platform. So that was in the early 1990s, right? Skip all the way to my postdoc days. So I've finished my undergrad, I've finished my master's, I've finished my PhD. Now let's go to the early 2000s where I did my postdoc at the University of Washington at the National Research Center for Statistics and the Environment. And that research center is mostly a Bayesian research center. So a lot of the majority of the work that comes out of that center is Bayesian in nature. But my first project as a postdoc there was actually not Bayesian in nature. It was just the so-called frequentist statistics methodology, and I called it Shipsel. But the sequel to Shipsel, so Shipsel was a first stab at addressing a certain type of problem, and to refine the method to deal with that problem, the sequel to Shipsel was what I call LHFI, and LHFI was definitely a Bayesian method. And you know, here's the so-called full circle, a first perspective of full circle. I started my kind of, you know, real research experience at a very young age, and it was Bayesian. But then actually since then, I didn't do any Bayesian until 10 years later when I was doing the sequel to Shipsel called LHFI, and that's when I resumed my work in Bayesian. So, you know, full circle in that sense. And the reason why I decided to employ the Bayesian paradigm was in very much, you know, under the urge of my partner in life and work, Anton Westphal, who was trained as a Bayesian. So immediately when he saw what I was trying to accomplish, he was like, yeah, there's no way you can do it not in a Bayesian way. Just do it in a Bayesian way, sure. But that was also when personal computers started to become more popular and more powerful, so not everybody needed to rely on the mainframe. So indeed, I did all this work on a Linux laptop. After my postdoc, my first academic appointment was as an assistant professor of statistics at the University of Waterloo back in Canada. And that was in the mid-2000s. And there, I actually really started to do everything pretty much in the Bayesian paradigm. So I had a master's student that helped me to develop the LHFI method to fruition. I also started to study food webs, and there are many different aspects to food webs. One aspect is the so-called system-wide food web, which is mainly pertaining to the concept of mass balance. So there's this you know, understanding of how food webs and the species in a food web function according to mass balance. And the method for doing inference under mass balance, the way I did it was employing a method called Bayesian melding. Bayesian melding is notorious for being computationally intensive. So anyway, those were the work that I did together with my master's student. Then with my PhD student, we did an extension to my own PhD work that I coined bent cables. So my PhD work on bent cables was frequentist, not Bayesian. So when I supervised my PhD student at Waterloo, we worked on extending the bent cable framework to something more complex. And usually, if you do something more complex, Bayesian paradigms would work a lot more straightforward. So now we are talking about the kind of start of people paying attention to the notion of HPC. So not very widely adopted because the resource was rare, and in particular at University of Waterloo, the HPC system was labeled SharkNet. SharkNet was very restricted in terms of access. So only certain groups on campus could apply for access to SharkNet. So what did we do? Myself and my students, we relied on the Mac desktop and laptop running all of the Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. So you throw everything onto the computer that we think would help it run fast. That's essentially what we did. By the way, that's a typical winter in Waterloo. And the rain here in Seattle, that's the typical day in Seattle, right? So from the rain to the snow. So I decided, okay, enough of that kind of weather, let me move to Australia. So I spent 6+ years in the first half of the 2010s at the federal government science lab called CSIRO. Basically, they're the science agency that does pretty much all science under the sun, and they're run out of the federal government. And there, I developed more Bayesian approaches to answer particular societal problems. So for example, now I'm going to look at a different aspect of food webs, particularly species interaction networks, who eats whom, in other words. I also looked at phenotyping crop species. So you plant crops and you try to plant the crops that give you more yield and healthier yield, more resilient to disease and all that kind of thing. So that's considered phenotyping. And crop phenotyping was a huge deal at CSIRO, and I used Bayesian methods for that. I continue to do Bayesian bent cables, LHFI, Bayesian melding, but now also this newer pursuit called data fusion. Essentially, you have many different sources of data on one aspect of the natural world. So there's all supposed to measure the same thing, but of course their answers are all different because they're measured using different tools. So how do we combine them and maximize the utility of the different data sets? So essentially, all of this work now is truly computationally intensive compared to the previous iterations, right? So all of these were, kind of doable on a laptop or desktop, but now all of this really has to be done on the HPC. So then after that, I spent 3 years at the Australian National University. Again, more or less continuing to develop more Bayesian methods and extending these methods that were only good for certain problems but not good for other problems. So you don't need to generalize those for a wider range of problems. We absolutely needed the HPC, but at ANU, unfortunately, the HPC wasn't very accessible, just like University of Waterloo. So enough was enough. I decided, no, I need to go to a place where they embrace the HPC and puts resources into making the HPC available. And here I am, William & Mary and VIMS and HPC heaven. So that's the aerial view of the VIMS campus. The VIMS campus is not in Williamsburg. The VIMS campus is actually across the river from Yorktown. Anyway, so I'm doing a lot of different projects here. Every single project requires the HPC, bar none. Like, really, without the HPC, I simply would not be able to do any of my work. So I just wanted to say that the HPC is my lifeline. And thank goodness we have a huge infrastructure of HPC at William & Mary and VIMS. And even my external students not at William & Mary have been making good use of that as an affiliate of William & Mary. And undergraduate students as well. Usually undergraduate students would not necessarily be exposed to the HPC, but mine do. So Eric Walter is here. He's the main guy with the HPC on campus. So I want to give a huge shout out to them. Without them, my work would not be possible. And what's more, the funny thing is, if you look at their website, they say, oh, contact us for support at this email or this number, but note that we only work during regular business hours. That's a lie. Eric, I'm sorry I'm saying this. It's a lie. You guys actually work around the clock. So that's just amazing, and I'm really appreciative, both myself and my students. So with that, I'll just say if people would like to check out my research, you can go onto ResearchGate and type my name, but make sure you include the middle initial S, because otherwise it leads to a different person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Melinda and Julie. This has been great talks. I enjoy all of them. I hope everyone that is in the audience also did. I think that we can take a couple questions now. While we do that, the thing that I want to show is that we're going to have our next event. This is just the beginning of what we are doing right now with Women in Virginia, Women in High Performance Computing. We hope to have our next meeting coming up January 2022. Let's hope that January 22 is going to bring more of sense of normal for everyone. And just really want to thank you everyone for being here. If you have any questions or you want to know more about our program, or if you want to be part of the program, be part of the committee, we'll really appreciate the help. As you see, we are right now 6 institutions that we are working together. We hope to have someone from ODU and GMU to be able to join this group. So if you have any questions, feel free right now to just, chat, just unmute yourself. And, if you want to talk about how, you hope that Virginia Women HPC might reach out, this is the place to do so. I think that there were some questions that were answered already through the chat. Thank you, Melinda and Julie, for that. Okay, so to avoid any awkward silence, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. Please, we hope to see you on the next meeting. We hope to start doing a little bit of the focus groups just to find out what the community would like to see coming out from this program. And like I said before, we thank you for your support and thank you for our male allies and advocates to being present here. And please share the news with your community. Just go about mentioning that we are here and we hope to just expand the community. And with that, thank you everyone. Thank you to the speaker. Thank you, Julie and Grace and Melinda for being here, and to our committee. I think that we still have few of them here. Carol Parrish is here from the University of Richmond. We have Eric Walter from William and Mary. I think that Jayshree from George Mason is still here. We have Alana from Virginia Tech. And I am missing anything else. And we have 2 members from that are part of the committee from UVA, Karsten Siller and also Michelle Coe. And I'm so appreciative of the support and all the help. I hope I didn't miss anyone from our committee. Okay. Everyone is here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Grace.
Gladys.
Thank you. No problem.
Gladys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Gladys.
Thank you. Eric, I think that we can stop